right, today on May Day, we have Ann Schreifels. Her love of nature began as a child when staying inside meant her mother found chores for her to do. So she spent time outdoors, and then she quickly preferred that habitat. This preference for the outside world continues to this day. After a career in business, Ann retired early to pursue her true passion, ecological restoration. She is currently a master naturalist with Woodford County, a steward with Parklands Foundation, secretary of the Peoria Wild Land Trust, and co-president of the Illinois Prarie chapter of Wild Ones. Her home is surrounded by native plants, and she truly believes that enjoying the wonders of nature is as easy as walking out the front door. She promotes the fascinating details of native plants and animals through her Facebook and Instagram accounts called An Acre of Nature. So you can follow her if you want. I met Ann in the vegan group that I'm in, and I would like you to welcome Ann to talk about where the wild things should be.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dawn, for such a nice introduction. When Dawn mentioned that I retired early, I'll try this microphone. I was from Caterpillar, and part of that reason, I think you might know if Kurt Norris is in the room. He and I worked together, so that precipitated the early retirement. I couldn't miss that one. Sorry. Yeah. So I'm going to try to go through things fast. As Jeffrey knows from downloading my presentation, I have about 250 slides here, and I could talk the rest of the afternoon about native plants and where the wild things should be, but I'm going to try to go quickly. So Don, if you can give me a wave and there's 5 minutes left, that would be great. The other thing is I don't know exactly which slides I included or not, so it might seem a little herky-jerky. But please feel free to ask questions. I don't want to just give a lecture. Nobody wants a lecture, so make it interactive, make it a conversation. But the Wild Ones mission, Wild Ones is a national nonprofit, and there's chapters all over the country. It's to promote environmentally sound landscaping practices. So basically the use of native plants in your home landscaping. And what I'll talk about pretty quickly here is why. And one of the reasons why, the big why, is the biodiversity crisis. A third of all insects are endangered or threatened, and 40% more are declining. So if you add a third and 40, that means most of the insects are on decline. And most of us don't really like insects or think about insects, but if there are no insects, there are no humans. So it's kind of something that we want to pay attention to. 3 billion birds are missing since the 1970 census. So in 1970, there were 10 billion birds in North America. 3 billion of them are no longer here. So that's the birds that come to our feeders. That's the geese that are in our parks, the ducks in our ponds, and all the birds that we know and enjoy. 3 billion of them fewer these days. And then another statistic I find incredible is that humans, livestock, and our pets, so basically the human footprint on the earth makes up 91% of all mammals, which is huge. So there's only 9% of the rest of the world, mammals in the world that are non-human or human-owned. So we have to do what we can to make the rest of the world more livable for the plants and animals that are in it. So there's 5 key drivers of biodiversity loss, and I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail, but not as much detail as there are slides in this deck, I promise you. First off, we're going to talk about native plants, and when we talk about them, we're really talking about trees, shrubs, grasses, forbs, and vines. So all of these exist in Illinois. Illinois is rich in plant diversity because we're such a long state. We go from the southern end to the northern end. We have several, I forget how many, but at least 4 or 5 different ecotypes in Illinois. So we have a great variety in our state. But when we change what Illinois used to look like into what it looks like now, and whether that's through housing, through farming, or other types of urbanization, it changes who can use and live on that land. So a lot of those birds have no place to find food, and same with the insects and the other animals and mammals. So that's one thing, is habitat loss. And I always encourage people not to think of nature as someplace you go to. You don't go to a nature preserve. You are nature. You are part of nature. We are all part of it. So we are a natural species on this planet. So don't think of nature as that separate from who we are. But native plants, just for definition, are the plants that existed here before the European settlement. So this is before, I guess that would have been in the 1700s, right? So these are the native plants that were here. Most of them are still here, but in much smaller numbers. But they form the foundation of the food web, because it's plants that take the sunlight and make that into food that we can either eat directly or through the animals. Anybody recognize this little caterpillar? A monarch, you guys are tuned in. Yes, native plants, they're adapted to this area. So whether that's through the rainfall patterns, the climate, the soil, the geology, they're adapted to this area. So when you go to the big box stores, you often find plants that are from Asia, from Europe, and they look pretty. So we take them home, we stick them in the yard, and they're basically just ornaments in the yard, because well, except for the Japanese beetles, there's not always a lot of things that eat those plants. But you want plants to be part of the ecosystem, and that's what the role that native plants play. So that little caterpillar has now grown a little bit bigger. So that's a caterpillar, and what is that caterpillar about to do? Yes, this table here is winning all the prizes. This one is getting ready to pupate, so that means that caterpillar is starting its transformation to a butterfly. But the monarch caterpillar only feeds on one type of plant. Star pupil over here, Dawn, wow. Yes, monarch caterpillars only feed on milkweed. And they have an incredible story. I'm sure you've been exposed to it at some point in the past, of how they migrate from Canada all the way down to central Mexico. And it's really incredible, but they need milkweed the entire path of their journey in order for them to survive. Sadly, their numbers are dropping precipitously. Part of that could be due to lower numbers of milkweed, and actually concentrated numbers of milkweed. So instead of the milkweed being dispersed with their predators also being dispersed, now milkweed is getting concentrated into fewer and fewer areas. So we want to kind of expand the numbers and areas that milkweed is in. Another one, not as many people know this one. Let's see, Dawn, how do you do? Do you know this butterfly? Do you know the flower? Anybody else? Violets is a flower. Yep, you got that one right. But this is the fritillary butterfly. And just like the monarch, the fritillaries only feed on violets. So this little violet that grows, 4 inches tall in your yard is the only food source for the fritillary butterfly. And the fritillaries are also dropping in number. And part of it is they have an interesting life cycle as well. Mother fritillary is not really that conscientious of her young, because she lays her eggs on everything, from dried leaves to grass to different kinds of plants. And that caterpillar, as soon as it comes out of the egg, has to go find a violet. And that tells scientists that violets used to be a lot more abundant, that they used to be everywhere, because the mother butterfly didn't have to work that hard to find the food plant for her young caterpillars. They just crawled a few inches, a couple feet, and they would find a violet. Now we spray our violets to death, and there's not that many violets, so that means that there's not as many fritillaries anymore. So there's little things that you can do, such as let that little patch of violets by your sidewalk continue to grow. They're pretty, they're 4 inches tall, they don't hurt anything. And speaking of which, the question I get asked as a Wild Ones member all the time is, how do I shrink my lawn? Everybody is tuned in that lawns can take a lot of time, they take a lot of water, they can take chemicals, but they don't really provide any life to the ecosystem. So people are asking, how do I shrink my lawn? How do I make it? And I'm just going to show a couple pictures here. This is my house, actually. And this is not even a true before picture. This is actually spring going into summer. But we did some remodeling, and what you see there now was all grass, your traditional American lawn when we moved in. And we changed it to all native landscaping. So probably should have mowed the grass before this picture, but you don't have to completely eliminate your yard. Some people, that's a little bit too intimidating, is to think that they have to get rid of their yard. But what we did is we just made big swatches of flower beds and put native plants in there. So it's, you know, you can use native plants just as you do in traditional landscaping. If you want a specimen plant, put mulch around it, go for it. You can do that. If you want more of a prairie look like this is, you can plant them close together and you get more of a meadow effect to your plantings. But generally speaking, you don't want to turn your backyard or your front yard into a prairie just because it takes a little bit of psychological adjustment for your neighbors. But these days, we ask a lot of our landscaping. It's not just enough to be pretty. We want it to actually be functional. So when we're looking at native plants, I want to point out this is Kentucky bluegrass here. So you can see how tall it grows and how deep its roots are, which are just a few inches, compared to the native plants here. So they go tens of feet down into the soil. So it's really impressive when you look just how deep those roots are going in there. So if you have rain events, downpours and whatnot, what do you think is going to wash away more easily? The bluegrass or the native plants? Not a trick question here. This is the native plants are going to hold that soil in place much better. And that's part too of what makes these so resilient. You don't have to water, you don't have to fertilize because they're in the soil doing what they do best. At the very least, whether or not you want to turn your yard into a place where you can find a spot for a few native plants, at the very least, don't plant the invasives. These are plants that have come through the nursery trade and have now taken over the natural areas. So things like the picture here is Bradford pear, Callery pear. Other bad guys are the burning bushes, the butterfly bushes, English ivy, barberries. And don't anybody ever plant vinca again because that's impossible to get rid of once it escapes. It's horrible. So considering that some of these are probably on your property, if you have any bit of a natural area in your yard, you probably have honeysuckle or autumn olive because they grow absolutely everywhere. But they offer nothing to wildlife despite the fact that they have beautiful berries. And sometimes they make a nice privacy barrier. But there are better alternatives to that because these berries don't provide the types of food that the birds need when they need it. So they'll eat them. You'll see birds eating these berries, but it's junk food for the birds and it won't give them enough nutrition to get them through winter. Great reading for more information on this. My two favorite books are Nature's Best Hope and Native Plants of the Midwest. Nature's Best Hope is a great book that tells you the why of doing all of this. Why should you plant a native plant? What's the motivation? Absolutely a wonderful book. It comes in a children's edition too, so I might offer one up for your free library. It's a really great, easy read, lots of pictures on that book. Native Plants of the Midwest, that one is a bit, that's not really something you know, curl up with a cup of coffee and read that one. That one's a great information encyclopedia that tells you everything you need to know, which also is on the internet. Surprise, surprise. So the book is handy. It's got nice pictures. You can page through it. But the QR code there, that is to our chapter website. And on the chapter website, we have all these links to different sources for picking out native plants. And there's nothing better than spending a little bit of time filling your shopping cart with some soon-to-be planted native plants. Now, like I said, the butterflies, the birds, the caterpillars, they're all going to appreciate any efforts that you make, whether it's in a pot on your front door or in your entire backyard turning into a prairie. There's many things that you can do. So basically, plant native plants. We have a plant sale coming up on May 17th in Carlock, which is halfway to Bloomington. Those plants are 100% local to our area and our ecosystem. This is the tallgrass prairie ecosystem of Illinois. And Illinois used to have 22 million acres of prairie. We are down to less than 2,000 of that original 22 million remaining. which is pretty sad and pretty scary, because in addition to the plants that grow above ground that we can see and appreciate, what's unique about those 2,000 acres is the soil has not been disturbed. So all the mycorrhiza and all the organisms that live in the soil are intact in those 2,000 acres. The restored prairies, there's many, many more acres of people restoring prairies, and that is absolutely fantastic. But they're missing the component of the eons that it took to put that soil biota into place. So this is just me putting my plug in for native plants. I know you're running a little bit behind on your timing today, but I'd be happy to take a few questions if anybody has any.
If you want us to.
I'm looking, yeah.
I think we only are
Oh, we only have one today?
Oh, she's
Okay.
here.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. Who's got a question? Jim?
I talked to a farmer recently, and he said they set aside part of, instead of farming it, that the state will pay them to turn it into national prairie. You've heard about that?
Yeah, the CRP program, the Conservation Reserve Program. Yeah, it's a great program. I hope that funding continues to allow that to grow. It's ideal for situations that it's marginal farmland to begin with, whether it be on the edge of a stream or on a hillside especially. Absolutely fantastic, and you'll start to see the life start to rebound in terms of insects and birds immediately the first year.
So I've read or heard that the bee population is in trouble, reduced. You didn't cover that, but it's important for pollination, isn't it?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I do have a lot of slides hidden in the presentation today about the bee decline. And a couple of things about that. Part of the problem for bee decline is loss of habitat, because each prairie acre that used to exist had a certain number of bees that it would support. So there's a kind of a level of ecosystem life that each acre can support. What we've done now is we've really concentrated that into pockets. And while insects and bees are good flyers, they may not know that they should fly due west for 2 miles to find the next pocket of flowers. And then the added stress to that is honeybees. And when we say save the bees, we're not talking save the honeybees. Honeybees are not in trouble in terms of their population. They're basically livestock from a North America standpoint. They're not native to North America. We don't have any native honeybees. So they all came from Europe and Asia. And what that does is it limits the carrying capacity of those flowering acres. So if you stick a hive with, I don't know, 50,000 bees, 100,000 bees on there, and the honeybees go out and they're collecting pollen and nectar, all that pollen and nectar they collect is now subtracted from the pollen and nectar available to the native bees. So it's the native bees, when we're talking about saving the bees, that we're need to put our focus on. So it's the bumblebees that we see at the flowers. I mean, they're practically tame as far as bees go, because you can almost pet a bumblebee.
Clay?
Thank you for presenting today. I have a question. Is this, if I wanted to convert my existing gardens into native, are there landscapers that specialize in this specifically? Or can I just ask any landscape to utilize native plants?
Both. If you want to convert it into more prairie, I would go with an expert on natives. But if you want to have like your specimen plant, like I would like something purple growing 3 feet tall, any landscaper should be able to do that. But there are several in the area that do specialize in native landscaping. We have some resources on our website. We have some local experts that can do that. There are tons of reading material and different books, and so maybe you and I can talk afterwards and I can get you some names.
And there's a native plant retailer, Best Buds.
Oh, I love Best
Over
Buds.
on Farmington Road in Sterling, and they just opened just a couple days ago, so you can check that out as well. Lynn, you'll be our last question.
Yes, I had a tree cut, had to have a tree cut down, and the roots are still growing in the, and I would like to kill them safely. There's a lot of dogs in my neighborhood, and there's a lot of wildlife, and I don't want to kill everything. I just want to kill, what can I do that's safe for the environment and blah, blah, blah.
Do you know what kind of tree it was?
There's a crab apple.
Okay, for a crabapple, and if you've got Marie sprouts coming up, what you can do is take a dauber, kind of like a bingo dauber, and put 25% Roundup in it, or glyphosate, and just daub that just on the stump itself. Don't touch any
The
leaves.
stump's gone.
But the resprouts, cut them off and
There's
daub it.
thousands of them.
Oh, goodness.
I mean, they're all over the place.
Then you might have to look at a foliar solution if you're okay with using chemicals, because it sounds like the more you cut that, the more it's gonna come back.
Okay, thanks.
Thousands of them are kind of overwhelming.
Okay, hundreds.
There's like four.
But also to give, Don did mention Best Buds, and they are a local nursery that's out on Farmington Road in West Peoria. And I am in no way associated with them, but they do source all their annuals, so just your regular marigolds and petunias, from growers that do not use insecticides, which is important, because there are the average, impatiens or petunias that you get from the big box stores will have been grown with neonicotinoid systemic insecticides in it. So the plant sucks it up with the intention of fending it off from insects. But you're planting it in your garden because you want to help the bees, but the bees take a drink of nectar from that plant, and it has an amount of neonicotinoid pesticide in it, and that's going to harm them. So ask your plant growers where they're getting their plants from and if they use any insecticides in it. Same with, sometimes organic is not entirely safe either, because they can use a product with Bacillus thuringiensis in it, which is toxic to caterpillars. And caterpillars are baby butterflies, so you can't always trust the organic label either. So just ask. Your growers should know where their plants come from.
There's also an organization or seller of native plants in Williamsfield called Prarie Nursery. Pleasant Prairie Nursery. And they open in May. So if you're interested in buying plants, you can go out there as well. And the University of Illinois Extension has website or webinars on native gardening. So you can check that out as well. Thanks, Ann.